beyond the economy, when we're looking at repairing relationships that have been broken, that have been stolen, that have been damaged by all of these horrific systems. What is the alternative? How do we create beauty, repair, and healing? And I'm so excited to hear from everyone. So, quickly talk you through the running order. First up, we have our community inheritance with Cecilia Reconfiguring. Then we've got the anti-offsetting primer with Luiza, Prado and Maxwell Ayamba. We'll have a short break after that, and then we'll come back with Into Being with Maria Bojanovska-John. Finally, we will have love, dialogue, confidence, coherence. Is this radical education with Susanna Hassan? Yes. Before we get going, I have to let you know, I have to remind you about this voting system over here. So, a reminder for those of you who were here earlier and pointing it out for those of you who didn't hear before. Whatever you think is the most urgent area that the Standing Data Gallery should be looking at in their environmental policy, please vote for it. Dip your hand in, thank you for that lovely demonstration. And yeah, please do. And I think it's a really great way of democratizing what we should be working towards. So I'm going to hand over to Cecilia Lee. Dr. Cecilia Lee, FRSA, is an independent curator, educator, and agitator who grew up in Bachelor's London. Unfortunately, Cecilia is passionate about addressing issues of equity and precarity in the workplace and beyond, through campaigning and creating infrastructures for art and social action, interconnectedness, and relationships within and beyond capitalism, with a focus on global ethnic majorities, deaf, disabled, working class, and LGBTQIA communities. As Associate Lecturer in Visual Communication at the Royal College of Art and founder of TDWM Studio, Cecilia is interested in how we learn and create to build more equitable worlds.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today for the launch of our community inheritance. It's the first edition of this project. I'm reading from notes so that I don't forget everything, because there's a lot to say. So thank you very much to Danny Adams, first of all, and to the whole Standing Picker Gallery team. You've been amazing. Thank you so much for supporting this project and the trust in making this project. But most of all, I just wanted to say thank you to the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service and the Grenfell independent communities who have been collaborators, partners, and participants in this project. And I'm gonna, we're all gonna take a turn to speak, but I'm gonna do the serious bit right now, or rather the wordy bit right now. So just to introduce you to the project, our community inheritance is a creative learning project made with UK communities. This is the first iteration, yes, that's better, apparently, I need to speak into this bit. Experimenting with community philanthropy and resource generation to explore more equitable circulation of wealth and resources. And so the project brings together decolonial approaches to cultural production, knowledge from community organising, radical community-centric approaches to fundraising, and liberatory understandings of economics as making home. So I want to start by telling you about the community inheritance of the project itself. In other words, some of the people and the projects that have shaped and informed it. So the project is influenced by so many artists and designers and activists and theorists, including Galgi Bhattacharya's work on intersectional approaches to the impacts of capitalism, and I was lucky enough to interview her as part of Edgar Villanueva's concepts of money as medicine and decolonising wealth as closing the racial wealth gap, as well as J.K. Gibson Graham's work on the iceberg model of economy, the Design Justice Network, as well as equitable listening in funding relationships as championed by people such as Nusrat Faizullah and Fazana Khan. Also, stuff around that was mentioned by Sam earlier today around complementary currencies and mutual credit systems, both in the UK as well as internationally, and lots of experiments in radical philanthropy as a challenge to the scarcity economics and space to lift up historically underrepresented and marginalised communities, as has been made manifest in projects such as the Giving Project, the Edge Fund, and Resourcing Racial Justice, and others. Some of the artistic projects that have really influenced me have been by Catherine Bow, her work on the Centre for Plausible Economies, as well as Ellie's work. Thank you, Ellie. Indeed. And as well as Raju Rage's Undervalued Energetic Economy Project, and also the Art and Music Project. So yeah, those have all been influences on this work. At the same time, each iteration of our community inheritance is basically about weaving unheard and new stories and creative processes with a local community. So the project creates local archives that document past and present understandings of diverse intergenerational knowledge and wealth, as well as creating collective proposals that respond to what our communities need to thrive. So, for this first edition of this project of our community inheritance, I've been working with Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service, as well as Grenfell impacted communities, to figure out what that intergenerational inheritance in all of its forms means for the community. So the aim was to think about all of that, all that we learn and all that we gain from our cultures, from our heritages, and to rethink and reframe understandings of both financial, spiritual, environmental, emotional, physical, and psychological health and inheritance. And so we also invited members of the community to create proposals for small-scale projects that respond to what the community needs to thrive. And we're going to be sharing some of these proposals with you today. We have these posters here that explain a little bit. But before I hand over to my collaborators, I just wanted to say a little bit about this project's relationship to climate. Namely, what does climate justice mean in an urban environment? Especially when governments and authorities have catastrophically failed to provide safe, livable environments, when gentrification and rising house prices have ghettoised swathes of population, particularly those who are racialised and from right or from low-income backgrounds. So when we think about climate in relation to the communities that are impacted, for example, by the Grenfell disaster, we also cannot avoid thinking about the giant elevated flyovers of the Westway. And the creation of the Westway, as we all know, demolished homes, it displaced families, it cut communities in North Kensington into two, it brought noise and air pollution, and also disruption with 47,000 cars a day within the first few months of its opening. So that was more than 50 years ago since it was completed, and the long-term impacts of the Westway are ongoing poor quality environmental conditions, poor health outcomes for communities living between and underneath the Westway, and it brings home the fact that providing a healthy environment and access to green spaces within low-income urban contexts has too often not been a priority for the authorities. But community organising and activism has really strongly emerged through those protests against the construction of the Westway, and has also obviously built upon those strong community networks and bonds from which the Notting Hill Carnival flourished. And I think Maura's probably going to be talking about that a little bit in a sec. So this incredible spirit and energy of activists and community members across generations continues to this day. And through this project, I was so honoured to meet some of the people who are really trying to fight for and create safe, livable environments. And what do we mean by this? That means access to green spaces, equal access to green spaces, equal access to well-resourced municipal amenities from schools through to leisure centres. Sorry, leisure spaces. Leisure centres? Maybe also leisure centres. I don't know. But yeah, housing that is well maintained, environments where the definitions of safety and security reverse practices of over-policing and surveillance. Streets that are free from pollution, streets where residents feel safe to use no or low carbon forms of transport, such as walking and cycling when they're travelling locally, equal access to affordable and healthy food within walking distance. So my question is, what is climate justice if we don't have these things in our communities? This is what climate justice looks like for those who live in the underserved urban areas of the global north. And I could carry on talking for a lot longer, but I want to actually hand over to my collaborators and partners. And first I'm going to hand over to Angela. Angela, should I? Do you want to? I'm going to sit down and then you.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Angela. And I'm a therapist from the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our service, just for a couple of minutes. So we're an NHS service that was set up after the Grenfell disaster for 5 years. So we've got 5 years of funding. And we work in partnership with the local community. We're all therapists or community workers, and we collaborate with existing community organisations to deliver wellbeing projects and also to deliver therapy. Our community inheritance is an example of that work. Okay. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. So making cultural adaptations and believing in the resilience of human beings is at the centre of what we all do and what we all believe. The Notting Hill community has a unique way of recovering from adversity through creativity and through collectivism. Local people have got amazing talents in art and in music, in activism and in problem solving. We all believe that capacity for healing and to some extent to justice comes from within. This project, our community inheritance, has helped to nourish us all on our journey to recovery.
Okay. My name is Luiza. I define myself as a community activist, but I also work with Angela as a community connector. So I'm not a clinician. My job, as I see it defined, is to bring the health and wellbeing service into the community rather than expecting the community to go to the health and wellbeing service. And I've been tasked to talk about the objects. Yeah?
I can be your helpful assistant if you like.
Okay. So before that, I think I just wanted to say a little bit about the community. Kingston Chelsea is probably one of the most unequal boroughs in the world, or certainly in the UK. And I think it's in this context that I think we reflect on what we in North Kensington have, own, have inherited, and especially, this is especially pertinent 5 years after the Grenfell atrocity, or as some of us say, the social murder of 72 has meant that Cecilia's reaching out to us has given us the opportunity to reflect on a community that has a long history of injustice, but also a long history of fighting against that injustice. And I think Cecilia mentioned the carnival, coming out of the race riots in '58, coming out of the murder of Kelso Cochrane, and that is today one of, I think, the Caribbean community's greatest contribution to British culture. So I've included a book down the front page called Carnival, edited by Ishmael Blackrow, and people can have a look at it. It's got the most fabulous photographs of the history of Carnival for people to look at, and I've opened it up on a page with one of the younger people who participated in the workshop, and it's his grandmother and his grandfather in this picture taken from the 60s. And his grandmother, Barbara Shevington, was the secretary of Ruan Laslett, who initiated the Notting Hill Carnival as we know it today. So please feel free to have a look at it. It's quite tricky to talk about the contributions, the inheritance of our community, because I think they are so wide and so broad. So, music, art, food, as I said, a long tradition. If people know anything, have a look at the history of the Mangrove Nine. The first time that they fought police racism and won, and there was a recognition that the police was institutionally racist, and that was in the 70s. And a lot of that tradition still carried through. I think our community relations, we're quite a close, I think Sue will probably agree with me, we're quite a closely connected community. We know each other, we tend to lean on each other, we share knowledge, we share experience. We also do row quite a bit now and again, but I think we see that as a family, and that's what happens in families. So, we also, do you want me to talk about some of the stuff? Yeah. So, I'll start there. This is a swim project that has come out of following Grenfell. It was funded on some Grenfell funding, and the theme of the I'll just read the back of this. It says, grief is like the ocean, it comes in waves, ebbing and flowing.
I'm going to show the camera.
Yeah. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it is overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. And the company is called Swim Unity. And the basis of that is to actually make, as it says on the back of that one, to make the joy of swimming accessible to all. Because we also know from our historically that actually children of colour, working class children, are often excluded from swimming. And swimming is actually such a healing, just being in water is incredibly healing. So that's one of the things that's actually, I think, our inheritance in the community. We have mosaics, and as Angela has reported, that she's seen more mosaics in North Kensington than she has in Morocco or Pompeii. I think this is a heart, obviously the Grenfell heart mosaic that was made by one of mosaic makers, and our service did a number of workshops with her, making something called stepping stones. So the route of the silent walk that we used to do every month to remember those who we've lost, the whole community has come in different groups and made these mosaics, stepping stones, with justice in lots of all the community languages. And they've been put into the ground on the route of the silent walk. So this is something that I think we've inherited think it goes back before the fire. And then we have Phillips, who has done. Can't take it out. So Philip talks about the inheritance of his father in Ireland, who invented a weaving machine. And Philip comes from Zimbabwe. Has lived in the borough for a number of years, or decades really. And coming from Zimbabwe, and I know that as a South African as well, we don't throw things away, we repair, we reuse because we can't afford it. And so Philip has brought this tradition and his own skills and expertise as an electrician to workshops in our community to actually to repair, to recycle, to reuse. And I think that kind of workshop, I think, has been incredibly therapeutic for many people because it gives you the space to feel like you're rebirthing, you mending something which is broken, but also the space to talk and to heal that way. And then, Angela, do you want to talk about this beautiful piece of work here?
So the artist of this picture has a vision for a community art class on a Saturday. It would be open to all ages and it would be freely available in the community at a local charity.
Beautiful.
I'd just like to say again thank you to the young person who completed this picture. It's amazing and it's very humbling.
Do you know what? I actually forgot to say what we actually did. Which was convened a group of and thank you so much to, yes, you can sit down because I'm actually going to get Sue to stand up in a second. Moira and Angela so helpfully convened an amazing group of community activists and participants and people from the community to explore these questions of what are the skills, what are the gifts what are the superpowers that you're bringing from your different heritages, cultures, families, and what proposals would you like to make in order for this community to thrive. And so I'm going to hand over with that to Sue, and thank you so much for coming along and also bringing this beautiful memory box. I will hold the memory box whilst you go.
Hi, so my name's Sue and I'm here from Solidarity Sports, which is a charity that was started in 2007. It started as an after-school club. It now looks after 85 children, all that have been referred by social services. All our children live with trauma. In 2017 at the fire, we lost a family in the fire. And one of the girls in the family, her dream was to go to Disneyland Paris. And so we started the foundation, and every year now we take children to Paris. The first trip was just her friends and family. So, but Solidarity Sports is huge on outdoor activities for our children. And up until recently, we haven't had any premises. Everything we've done has been on trips to local parks, trampolining, anywhere like that. So yeah, we are a safe space for children that have suffered trauma in North Kent and Hammersmith and Fulham.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this memory box. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the memory box? Because, you were very brief.
Yes, so the children have made this. This was their idea when we said what we'll do, something that would remind us of what we do and what we're for. A lot of them, some of our volunteers actually started off as children at Solidarity Sports, and they've come through, and with their experience, they're really great with our kids now. So that's what this is. So this is our trip to Paris that they've made.
yeah, I mean, I know that we probably should be wrapping up this section. There's so much to say about this project, and thank you so much for collaborating with me. And I think it's been a really amazing, it's been a really amazing experience. Also because, I was 14. The first time I came to North Kensington's Ladbroke Grove, I was 14, and I visited a young people's music project, and I was just like, these people are great in West London. I want to hang out more with them. And so, that is one of the reasons why I still want to be involved in all of the work that you do. This is, I think I had some kind of closing notes, but actually I'm just throwing them out the window, and I just wanted to say thank you very much, everyone, for listening, but also all of the people who participated in this project who are not present in the room right now, because all of their contributions were so important. Please have a look at all of the things, all of the objects, as well as the posters and proposals that we created. Thank you so much.
Thank you, please do make sure that you get a chance to have a look. And amazing that we've got the artist of this wonderful piece here. What's your name? Okay, make sure that you let her know how wonderful it is as well. Right, so I think that what we're going to do now is we're going to turn our chairs around. Some physical activity.
Yellow. Is there going to be a speaker? Are they watching something? It's going to come from the speakers, right? From the speakers?
Get your standing up, get your energy going. I'm really pleased to now introduce Dr. Luiza Prado, an artist, writer and researcher whose work examines themes around fertility, reproduction, coloniality, gender and race. She is a part of the curatorial board of Transmedial 2021, an assistant professor and vice director of the Centre for Other Worlds at the Luiza University in Lisbon, and she is a founding member of Decolonizing Design. You can find her on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and academia, and she is currently based in Berlin, and we're really, really pleased to have her here with us today.
Thank you. I just had this done, so bear with me as I try to juggle a microphone and my notes. I think I'm going to sit down because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. I realized that do you have Maxwell printed? Yeah, printed. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. So I am going to start by introducing Maxwell, which I'm very, very thankful for you to be here. Thank you so much. And I was very lucky to interview him as part of the project project that I'm conducting here and that Danny very generously invited me to be part of. So Maxwell Ayamba is a PhD student in Black Studies whose research interests transcends the trajectories of race, ecology, and environmental justice in the UK, and the genealogy of people of Black African ancestry in the natural environment in the UK from the Roman times to slavery, colonialism, and post-colonialism. Prior to commencing his PhD at the University of Nottingham, he worked as an associate lecturer and research associate at Sheffield Hallam University. After completing a Master of Science degree, Maxwell, who is also a qualified journalist, set up the Sheffield Environmental Movement charity in 2016 to promote access and participation in the natural environment for people from Black and ethnic minority communities. He also co-founded the 100 Black Men Walk for Health group, featured on Channel 4 News on January 13, 2019. In the section Black Men Walking, How Walking Hobby became a symbol of identity, which inspired the production of the national play Black Men Walking by Eclipse and Royal Exchange Theatre Production. In 2013, Maxwell contributed to the publication of Opal Community Environment Report, Exploring Nature Together, which launched at the House of Lords. In 2009, he produced a working manual titled Engaging Black and Ethnic Minority Communities, Volumes 1 and 2, and published for the Environment Agency of the Northeast region. So, once again, Maxwell, thank you so much. So, I want to begin by telling you a little bit about the anti-offsetting primer, which is the section of this amazing and ambitious and very extensive project that Danny has been developing over these past few years. And I want to start by asking a couple of questions, or starting with reflections. Where do we go as the land crumbles under our feet? How do we learn to grow again once the tower has fallen? At a time where multiple overlapping crises, environmental disasters, pandemics, economic recession, the spread of fascist ideologies, cast such long shadows on the choreographies of the everyday, a reflection on the theme of world endings and beginnings feels inevitable. It is within this context that Danny first invited me to collaborate on this primer and to reflect on the practice of carbon offsetting in the arts within the context of the climate crisis. Carbon offsetting is a way to compensate for your emissions by funding an equivalent carbon dioxide saving elsewhere. It can take place in markets and by funding ecological schemes. In the UK, carbon offsetting is an approach suggested by the Arts Council England to arts organizations who cannot reduce, quote-unquote, their carbon emissions in their business. And as such, carbon offsetting takes destruction as a given and situates repair within a transactional framework. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later. Immediately when we started this primer, our hope was to offer useful reflections on engaging with the arts and culture sectors from perspectives committed to the struggle for environmental justice. And so the primer was born as a dialogue initiated from an understanding that this struggle cannot be divorced from anti-colonial, anti-racist, and feminist movements, and from the political mobilization of workers, or from queer liberation, just to name a few. So now we need to think about a little bit, about something that I find really fundamental to understanding the impact or to kind of unraveling these ideas of carbon offsetting. So central to the relationship between contemporary capitalism and world endings is the idea of a resource. What constitutes a resource is contextual. It is a concept that emerges and is realized within a very specific and contingent also historical, cultural, and geopolitical framework. Geographer Philippe Le Billon provided some of the means and motive of global European power expansion, while also being the focus of interstate rivalry and strategic denial of access. Water, gold, diamonds, oil, copper, all of these have, at some point or another, been termed as resources, or also to a lesser or greater extent. The repercussions of what Levion calls resource wars, which are conflicts stemming from the struggle for access to these commodities, are vast. In the beginning of the 21st century, the greed for access and control over oil was a key animating factor behind the imperial wars initiated by the United States and its allies in Afghanistan and Iraq. These conflicts changed the political and economic configuration of the world, killing and displacing hundreds of thousands of people. In 1973, right after the coup that killed leftist President Salvador Allende, the military regime of General Augusto Pinochet made it one of its top priorities to grant the United States unrestricted access to the country's copper reserves, which had been nationalized by Allende. Earlier still, at the end of the 17th century, access to gold had been key to the colonial expansion of the Portuguese Empire in the land currently known as Brazil, which was part of the Portuguese project to maintain economic competitiveness with the British and the Dutch. Human and more than human life has at times also been classified as a resource. This classification is accompanied, of course, by a denial of one's subjectivity, agency, and humanity. If access to resources constitutes then a point of struggle, it is in these frictions that the hierarchy of subjectivity imposed by coloniality is realized. How many wars have Western powers initiated in this century alone in the struggle for control over access to oil? Who were the victims of those wars? Who is profiting from illegal gold mining in the Amazon basin? And who is suffering its most direct impacts? Within this framework, some are rendered disposable, sacrifices at the altar of the gods of progress and growth. A transactional approach to each other also translates into a transactional approach to more than human life. From the moment that we understand that our value as human beings can be quantified through, for instance, our capability to generate profit, we subsequently position ourselves to apply the same measure to other forms of life. A worker is meant to be replaced as soon as productivity drops, because there's always someone else. A landscape can be exploited until depletion, because there's always somewhere else. Only there isn't. Actually, my notes are chopped. Well, fine. It happens. Well, I'm just gonna wing it. Sorry? Yeah, that would be good. Well, in the meantime, I think I'm going to continue. But when we think about this, and when we look at carbon emissions and carbon offsetting specifically, it is a practice that is based on the idea that landscapes are replaceable. And that's where I was going. Well, I think it's dry enough, I guess. But there we go. So it is exactly in these false notions of disposability that carbon offsetting is designed to appeal, right? Offsetting is a very convenient practice, as writer Danny Kajuri notes. It's a checkbox that allows you personally, to compensate for your emissions, seamlessly incorporated into the purchase of a plane ticket, for instance. I'm sure many of us have seen that lately. A carton of plant-based milk that proudly announces its brand support for a reforestation project somewhere in a named place below the equator, with, of course, very little information as to the hows and whys and what kinds of plants are being replaced. Startups that also claim to allow for the atonement of one's environmental sins through a choice of 3 convenient subscription plans, each one promising a different number of trees planted every month. Carbon credits also available in a specialized emerging stock market, easy enough for a conglomerate to acquire and then make the claim that its newest endeavor, a copper mine, is carbon neutral. It's seductively simple, and it's a proposal that operates on the premise that money can fix any problem. It demands no further commitment, no real reflection or change in the ways that the systems that are causing this environmental harm in the first place are structured. And as Drury points out in this really excellent article, quote, environmental offset schemes make no demand on corporations to limit their economic activity, instead hoping to balance it out through positive environmental contributions. In parallel, these schemes assume that landscapes can be easily replaced, that they are, quote, mere collections of species and things, unquote. The reality is, of course, much more complicated. Landscapes are homes to modes of living, cultures, histories, peoples, rich tapestries where human and more than human relations emerge, all of which continued to be rendered disposable through the practice of offsetting. For this primer, as I said, I was very honored and very lucky to interview a number of people from a number of different fields, different places. One of them, if you were here since the early afternoon, one of them was Amazonera Arawak, who was responsible for the film that we watched, the short film that we watched earlier today. With Amazonera, we discussed a little bit the art space that was run by the late artist Jair Bell in the Amazon Basin in the city of Boa Vista. I also interviewed archaeologist Armedi, where we, in a beautiful interview also, where we discussed shrines, fertility shrines, and her research in North Lebanon, and how environmental changes are also changing the practices, the spiritual practices that people are able to develop in those landscapes. I also interviewed curator Elena Mudio, who works at Savvy Contemporary, an amazing art space in Berlin. And I also interviewed Maxwell for this project. And I think now I'm going to hand it over to you. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Greetings from Sheffield. I don't know how many of you have been to Sheffield. I think as part of my introductions, something was left out. I'm an ecocentrist. I don't know how many of you are aware of ecocentrist. I think everyone has become one these days, the way things are going. And then secondly, I was the first black person or person of color to sit on the Ramblers board in the UK. You know the Ramblers? The Ramblers. And then I was also named as one of the 70 most remarkable people in the history of the British National Park since its creation in 1951. And then I was also awarded the National Heritage Award for Heritage by the Big Lottery Fund last year. I call myself academic. Academic means practitioner and an academic. And then I also call myself a scholar activist. So I wear several hats. I'm originally from Ghana. I'm not related to Kwating, Kwesi Kwating. So please forgive me, because I'm an ecocentrist. I'm not a financier. I don't deal with accounts and those kind of things. But on a more serious note, I'm here just to share some thoughts with you. And I'm going to run through slides as well. So I would like to begin with a quote from Antonio Guterres. You know him?
Yes.
Yeah, the UN General Secretary. He was published in The Guardian 18th of July 2022. Quote, "You have a choice, collective action or collective suicide. It is simple, please," unquote. That speaks volumes, doesn't it? This stark warning epitomizes the trajectory of the environmental crisis we face as human community. But unfortunately, it is those categorized as Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, and probably deprived white communities who tend to suffer the brunt of the environmental crisis for no fault of theirs. There's a failure to reflect environmental justice and race in service provision, in campaigns and internally by large white environmental organizations. And there's a history here. And what is the history? The trajectory of race, ecology, and environmental justice in the UK leaves much to desire. And for many minoritized or people from deprived communities who live what we call disparate ecologies, there's no space to escape. These disparities in living standards and inequality of opportunities are apparent from the very moment they open their doors and step outside. I'm lucky, I'm from Sheffield, so when I open my door, at least I'm in the British National Park. But those of you who live in London, I don't know, that's a different ball game. I don't know the level of air pollution you breathe all the time, but I presume it's over 40 micrograms. And so you might have heard of the case of that young girl who died in home. Yeah? Okay. And I'm going to be more serious. Do you know that the UK occupies around 60 million acres of land? 60 million acres of land. And if this land were to be split equally, each person living here would occupy an acre each. Each person would occupy an acre each. Do you believe that? Right. In England alone, half of the country is owned by less than 1% of the population. Less than 1% of the population. Rendering much of the countryside inaccessible. We have a right to roam only 8%. Only 8% of the countryside. So 8% we can roam of the countryside, the rest of the 92%, tell me where is it? Then we have access to only 3% of the waterways, 97%, tell me where it is. So my good friend Guy Shawshaw, have you heard of Guy Shawshaw? Yeah. So myself and Guy Shawshaw, we were involved last year what called the Kenya in Kalama's Trespass, which I spoke. Because Guy and my other friend, Nick Peace, who wrote the book of Trespass, Crossing the Lines That Divide Us. Guy said, the country is divided into two, old money and new money. So old money who own the land, the aristocracy, the crown, the gentry, all the land inherited. They own 44% of the land, the rest of the 45% is owned by what? New money. The Arab sheikhs, the Russian oligarchs, the American financiers, yeah, they own the rest of the land. So you go to a countryside and private property, stay out. This was happening. So, last year, or 2 years ago, I think last year, the government launched what they call the Green Social Prescribing. Have you heard of Green Social Prescribing? Yeah. What does it talk about? Green Social? Yeah, what does Green Social? Going for a walk. Well, that's not your problem. When you go for a walk. So Green Social Prescribing is a new initiative the government launched. Basically, what the government is trying to argue here is antidepressant doesn't solve the problems anymore. And I mean, going back to Luiza's talk she was talking about, and I think if you go back to Schumacher, Small is Beautiful, where he talks about there will come a time where humanity or human beings will become products of production, tools of production, part of the industrial process. So basically, we are now living in times where we are part of those tools of production. We work and work and work, and we become so stressful that we are detached from our natural world. And so what they've done is introduce what we call popular culture, right? And you know popular culture, don't you? Music, the arts, and everything. And then distances from the countryside. So they keep the countryside for themselves, and we get crowded like rats in a cage. Okay? And then now, we have realized that, the same thing happened during 1932 when the mass trespass happened, when the Enclosure Acts were introduced. land was taken away from the commoners. Yeah? And people were not allowed to access the countryside. And so that's how Ben Rothman and his compatriots came about with the mass trespass in 1932, which I will show you some pictures. I have some slides here just run through. I just want to give the ground. So why should we be crowded into spaces when there's so much land, so much space to access for our health and well-being? Mental health is the biggest issue now. Stress is the biggest issue. Orthodox medication doesn't solve the problem. We know nature is everything. That's why I call myself, an ecocentrist. I walk everywhere if I can get there, but I don't walk in polluted areas because I know how much pollution, toxic can take into my lungs. And now air pollution is linked to ADHD, it's linked to mental health, it's linked to dementia, it's linked to Alzheimer's, it's linked to birth effects. All the research have come out to demonstrate that air pollution can trigger all kinds of illnesses. And so when the COVID happened, much of the people who died had exposure to fumes with air. Because basically those toxic chemicals that go into our bloodstream, you don't know how they're working within your system. And yet we have a big countryside line there that we can access for fresh air. People living in London don't know the difference between clean air and bad air because they only use the air they breathe in. So they don't know the difference. Until you take them out and show them where there's something better life somewhere. And we are what we call the white flight, where most people, the rich people now go into the countryside to buy big houses and to live there. This is the world we live in. Okay. So what happened? I'm not going to through my slides. Next slide, please. I'll just give you the background. So keep going. Yeah, this is fine. So that's here. This is a place called Wellbeing. That's the big national park. And I like hiking. I take people up the Nevis and Scaffold. And just going out there, I feel at home. Because nature is everything. We are part of nature. That's why when people die, they say, from what? Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. That's where you come from. That's where you go back. There's no escape. But we have created a system where basically we think we are above nature. And that's why in academia they call it anthropogenism. So instead of being biocentric, connected with nature, we think we are above nature. And that's why when we now see a lot of things happening in the world, at a time, okay, just let me know if I'm running out of time. Then we begin to see you want to fight against nature, but you can't fight against nature because you're part of nature. And you fight against something that you're part of. So you have to work with nature. Right. So keep going. Next slide. So starting with black men walking. Black men walking. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Black Men Walking play, which was staged by the Eclipse of Reality production in 2018-2019. So these pictures here see us up and nervous. People say, why are black men walking the countryside? They're not supposed to be out there. They're supposed to be in the cities. That's where they belong. Right? But it's a question of understanding that living black people in this country for centuries, not only the Windrush in 1948 that black people came here, we had black people. The Roman Empire Septimius was here, marched with the soldiers on the Roman road in Sheffield. We have the Blackamoors, we have the Black Tubes, we have the slave people, National Trust, all the properties there, as from slave labor. So there's been black presidency for centuries, but they've not been written in history. So we started the Black Men Walking play, which is more or less sort of Black Men Walking, like, though we want to work for mental health and well-being, but little did we know that it was more or less like making a political statement here that we want to take ownership or claim to the land that our ancestors walked before. So that's what Black Men Walking came about. It was more or less like a political statement from some quarters. Anyway, so we started Black Men Walking, and eventually it became a national play, and all the theaters were full. They had staged in 2018 and 2019, and guess what? All the audience in the play who went to watch the play were all white, less than 1%. But they were wondering why black men walking in the countryside. What are they doing there? foundational and fundamental as human beings. That's what we brought up. It's modernism that has changed our lifestyle. That's why now we see transportation like that. But human beings were born to walk. And that's why people who don't walk or exercise have a lot of ill health problems. And when you walk, you go into your nature, your environment. It's good for both your physical and mental well-being. So these pictures here, you see, was Ben Nevis, and that was me up there, probably you could see. I don't know how many of you have been up Ben Nevis, but it's quite a feat to get up there. And when you get there, you understand that you are human. You understand what I mean by you are human? Yeah, that's how you understand. Okay, next slide please. Being human. Now, I spoke about the black tools. If you read Oneka's book, in black tools, they've been here for centuries. And some of them were very wealthy. But most people just don't see or think about black people being here, except the Windrush generation. They've been black for centuries. So if you read Onyeka's book, like, England's countrymen, black tools, you will see about it. Next slide, please. Well, Megan is not the first person to marry the royal family. It's Charlotte. Okay? She, King George, there. But nobody knows about that. These are histories. Yeah? And if you read Corey Fowler's book, The Green and Pleasant Land, we say England is a green pleasant land, but is it really green and pleasant? Yeah, let's talk about that. Next slide, please. So, race and the English countryside space. Why should race be an issue in the countryside? Countryside is not racist, is it? So why? But when we go out walking, God, that's a lot of you out here today. God, what are you doing here? Are you celebrating something? Okay? I see these are not spaces for us to be there. But these are our spaces. We pay taxes for the maintenance of these 15 national parks in England. Finishing? How many minutes? 2 minutes. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so you see this guy here? You'll say, yeah, he's not supposed to be in that space. Right? He's not supposed to be in that space. Who says he's not? Next slide, please. Yeah, you don't belong. Read their book, Anita's book. I belong here. We belong here as well. Next. Identity and space. Next. Yeah, my friend. Who owns England? That's my friend guy. Yeah, read his book. Next. That's Betty Rothman. When he was sentenced, the judge told he was a Jew. So he had no this in here. So those are the trespassers. 1932, were jailed. Next. That's my friend, guy. Sorry, Nick. Yeah? Read that book. And we've set up what we call Right to Roam campaign throughout England now. And we are driving it's a movement we'll take it forward. Next. Black men walk. We walked England before the English. Even though you don't see us, we are waiting for the landscape. Next. New black girl side. All these emerging working groups have started coming. And then say, oh no, they are taking over. Next, please. Yeah, they will have tweets. Yeah. Serious tweets. I get lambasted left and right all the time. I keep going. Next. So we've got all these come, learning Caribbean trekkers, blah blah, wanderlust, all these groups have emerged. Following our first walk in 2004, we started Black Men Walking. Next. Yeah. So this group of London Caribbean trekkers will join us walk in Sheffield. Next. Yeah, more groups all over the places. Enjoying what God has created. Next. That's who. You know that lady? That's my best friend. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Now we're going for the Q&A. Do we have
90 years to commemorate the mass trespass. Parliament was supposed to change the law. It was written by Lord Agnew to increase. I think it was the motion was started by the former Green MP, what's the name, Karen Lucas. So the bill was supposed to pass to increase the space in Roman from 8% to 23%. No, the government U-turned. It didn't. And it said, the minister said, oh, the countryside is for business. Okay? And then you know what they did again? They introduced a police crime bill. Right? Where trespassing, which initially was a civil offense, is now going to be what? A criminal offense. And so, basically what they're arguing here is, oh, it's targeting our traveler communities. No, the rich people who own the land don't want you there. It's nothing to do with black or white. It's class, it's power, it's property. Don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. That is where we are. Property is property. Next question.
So, I was kind of interested in this idea of altering the kind of perspective. We are quite a selective group in this room, and the trolling that you experienced obviously very appalling. But I was just thinking back to a comment by Heathrow's Director of Sustainability, Matt Gorman, when people are, the question of whether we should abandon, for example, carbon offsetting and that type of thing, alternative ways of thinking about the land. And he said it's politically naive. And I'm kind of interested, the vast masses of people are very happy, as far as he was concerned, with the status quo. And I'm kind of interested to know how your work and your walking is digging into or eroding that kind of comment, that kind of attitude.
Thank you. I think that's a good question. I think the whole issue around carbon offsetting is something that has become politicized. Okay, in such a way. We understand that we are facing, we are in the Anthropocene at the moment. Climate crises are real, and we can see it happening all over the world. But if something becomes politicized, then it becomes a weapon that people could use in different ways. I'll give you a good example. The government introduced what we call ELMS, which means Enhanced Land Management Scheme, which basically was supposed to pay farmers to open up their land for people to work. Farmers said fine. Then they introduced what carbon offset, where farms are now being bought by companies to plant trees to offset carbon. So farmers are beginning to lose their land, where basically that's where we get our food from. Okay? So we are an institute. What that comment he made is politicized. That's the way it is. And I think not until it hits us in the face will we know that we are being used as pawns in this political game. And that's why it is really good sometimes to read and critically analyze some of these statements that people make. And I think the problem we have as a people is when these politicians begin to play the political game, then we become the pawns in the game. And so that's why sessions like this are important to empower people to understand. But when I was talking about only having 8% room, and some of these things, people are not aware because people are preoccupied with their daily lives and struggles and those kind of things. But I think now what we're facing with the energy crisis, when it hits your pocket, when you go home, the heating is not coming on, you can get hot water to bath, you can cook, then you begin to sit and say, all right, so all along, I've just gone with the flow without really even sitting down to think a second what's going on. So I think it's important that we empower ourselves through, events like this, and then questions like what you brought up can be discussed, and then to see how we take those issues back to our communities. Because basically we're going to be voted, we have the power to vote them out, but if we don't understand the politics that is being played, how can we empower people in the communities to vote them out? seen, but do they really represent our interests? Who represents our interests? This is the question. Who represents our interests? Who?
Green Party?
Green Party? Okay, bring them on then. Let's see what happens.
I think there's also something really interesting. I've been thinking, reflecting on your presentation and thinking about also how this type of comment also flies because of the detachment that people feel towards landscapes, towards natural environments. And the kind of work that you're doing is nurturing that attachment and that relationship with landscapes. It is impossible to accept the destruction of something that you're invested in, that you're emotionally also invested in. And I keep thinking about kind of the historical background to this. I was reminded of Silvia Federici and how she describes the process of the creation of land enclosures, like lands going from something that belongs to the commons into and becoming something that is owned by an elite, and that commoners were renting or were tenants of that elite. How that process caused so many shifts in social relations, and specifically Federici is talking about that in relation to the confinement of women into the domestic sphere, and how that process was tied into that. But I think there's something really important also, there's an emotional aspect to this that kind of goes and unfolds into the situation that we're seeing right now, where, someone says, a politician says that questioning offsetting is politically naive, and they're not. The French know how to deal with this. They've done it a few times, but it doesn't cause an immense reaction of rejection.
No, I think you're right there, yeah. Any more questions? Don't be shy. Ask questions. Okay, wrapping up.
That was really, really interesting. It was really lovely to hear and see all of the pictures as well. This is why I go back to the countryside very much. People stare. But, our families are from rural areas. Our families have grown up around nature. There's no, there's nothing that is inherently within our blood, within our souls, that is tied to concrete. And we come to this country, our parents and grandparents or further back have come to this country and have been put into these spaces that are inhuman, because we are not human to power. Thank you so much. So we're going to a